This is Colby Peters. In this video, I am attempting a copy of a painting of Sparkly Waves by an artist on Instagram. I was able to give this a shot because she has a time-lapse video on Instagram where she shows her process. This feels very ambitious to me. I have never attempted painting water, and I think her painting is incredible. She uses what I think are acrylics, but I wanted to try this in watercolor because that's what I'm into these days. Because I'm using a different painting medium, I need to kind of translate what she does into watercolor language. Her first step is to paint bands of blues, lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. She mixes the different blues, I'm assuming, by adding different amounts of white after she gets the blue tone that she wants. Because I'm working with watercolor, all I need to do is mix the darkest blue color and then use the white of the paper to create the gradation. The color I've mixed is a kind of royal or Prussian blue with some green and a bit of black. I realized soon after I start painting that this is going to be a layering job. I will need to paint a layer of pigment, allow it to dry, and then paint another layer until I build up enough pigment to get the blue as dark as I want it at the bottom. I use a hairdryer to dry in between to speed up the process. I'm using a mop brush for this part because it holds a good amount of water and pigment. I have so much pigment in the water that I have to remember to stir it up each time I get more. This is where I've just finished drying my first layer of pigment and I'm adding another layer. I have to be honest with you all, I am totally making this up as I go along. I have no idea if this is the best way to do this. I'm just trying different things as I go. Here is where I've grabbed some water to even out the gradient in the middle and spread some of the pigment out. I just finished drying the last layer and I'm starting another one. Here, I get some water again to even out the pigment. We're going to speed up the layering process a bit because I have to do the same thing a few more times. I realize at this point that I have a lot of pigment collecting at the edges of the painting, so I work on trying to put more pigment in the middle. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the gradient and I'm ready to do the waves. I'm going to do the dark parts of the waves first and then the highlights. I decide to switch from the smaller brush back to the mop brush because I feel like I'm not getting enough pigment onto the page. Obviously, I'm feeling a little hesitant about this process. I have not painted waves before, so I'm not sure what I'm doing. Okay, here's one of the tricky things about watercolor. It's wet, so when it goes on, it looks so much darker than it's going to be when it dries. I was pretty happy with the color when it was wet, and then it just sort of disappeared after I used the hairdryer. So I decided to try a little black pigment in water to create the dark blue I'm looking for. I'm actually glad I got the chance to do these waves again because I like how they're coming out the second time better. As I was studying the original painting, I noticed that the waves are not only darker at the bottom, but also larger and closer together, which makes sense perspective-wise. So I'm keeping that in mind as I continue painting from bottom to top. I've also switched to the smaller brush again, since the waves are going to be getting smaller. Because I'm out of the darkest part of the painting at this point, I decided to try using the blue I made for the rest of the waves and maybe layer it on if I need to. The black worked at the bottom, but I can definitely tell the difference in tone. I'm going to speed this up a bit for the rest of the waves. Here I'm going back and layering on some more pigment to make the bottom waves a bit darker and adjust the tone of the waves at the very bottom of the painting. Now that I have all of the dark parts of the waves, it's time to do the highlights. I use white pigment and water after I have dried the painting with the hairdryer. As I paint, I am carefully studying the time-lapse video the artist has done, but I'm having a lot of trouble figuring out exactly where the highlights should go and how they should be shaped. When the artist started putting on the highlights, it looked immediately like the waves were popping off the page, but in mine, it's looking more like white waves on top of blue waves. I've skipped ahead a bit in the highlighting process. At this point, I'm feeling some despair about how this painting is turning out, and I'm considering quitting, but somehow I convinced myself that it's the journey, not the destination. I leave the bottom of the painting for a bit and decide to just work on the top and see if that goes any better. Here is where I'm able to pinpoint the actual shape of the highlight in the original painting instead of just trying to follow the wave shapes, and this seems to be working out. I'm going to speed the rest of the highlighting process up for you. The highlights are looking a little too bright, so I go back with water to tone them down a bit. I'm okay with the top half of the painting, but the bottom half of the painting is not working for me. So I study the original again and decide to add some blue back in among the highlights to see if I can make it look more realistic. I'm going to speed this up for you just a bit. I think it looks better, and I decide to go back through the entire painting and tone down the highlights again. It just seems like there's too much contrast right now. Here, I'm adding some dark blue to the bottom to try and improve the quality of the contrast between the light and dark colors. I think I've rescued the situation, and I'm ready for the last step, which is to add the sparkles on the water. I used the pigment right off the pigment cake because I'll need the sparkles to be super bright white. As I'm painting, I'm studying the original, and I notice that the sparkles are smaller and closer together at the top and larger and farther apart at the bottom, which again makes sense perspective-wise. Also, the sparkles tend to congregate along the top edges of the darker parts of the waves. Okay, let's take the tape off. I'm actually pretty satisfied about how this has turned out. Things were looking pretty rough there midway through, but I'm glad I stuck with it. This is going to kill my ego, but let's look at mine in the original side by side. Obviously, the artist who did the original has been doing this a lot longer than I have. Her brushstrokes are more nuanced and realistic. Her contrasts are also better. I'm glad I gave this a shot though. I enjoyed doing it and I learned a lot. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave comments or questions.